Ride-hailing apps have become a part and parcel of modern urban Indian life, and it's been quite a journey from the early adoption days. Now, Uber India has completed 9 years in the country, and over this time, it's gone from getting people to accept this new technology to now fending off complaints of service not to quite the extent consumers are expecting. To speak on all of this and their outlook for the future, I'm joined today in our Mumbai offices by Prabhjeet Singh. He's the president of Uber India and South Asia. Prabhjeet, great to have you on the Times Network.
Tamanna, thank you for having me here.
So, if I were to talk about some of the challenges that Uber has faced in its journey in India, and Uber has had some very typical problems in every country. The first challenge always is that the local taxi unions or the local taxi drivers come and say that, hey, our business is going to be affected, and then you brave that. Then acceptability from consumers, paying your drivers, etc. In India, you had one additional factor, which was a very strong competitor. How has that impacted the way you strategized your growth here?
Tamanna, clearly, in addition to the wider category challenges, having a strong, local, well-funded competitor who's very agile and who we respect does make us strive harder. And competition makes us better. But at the end of the day, we don't obsess about other ride-hailing players. We believe the wider ride-hailing opportunity is massive for multiple players to build big sustainable businesses. Our real competition is actually private vehicle ownership. How do we ensure that the next private vehicle, before that gets bought, people have a really strong look at, can Uber meet that requirement instead? So I think that is being the real emphasis. We are competition aware, but not competition obsessed. We do learn from them on things which we can do better. But at the end of the day, the size of the prize and what we're doing in India is it's a multi-decade journey, and so much more has to be done. So that's why we take a real lens of how do we take Uber's global strength and win in India by bringing the best of our technology, married to the local innovation, and then come up with new innovative products. And that's why, as you see, there's a real separation now happening. We are focusing on the mobility space. We don't own assets. We want to become the single platform for all mobility options and keep iterating and making that experience better. We are razor sharp and focused on doing that.
Yeah. So I found that very interesting where you said that your real competition is not from another ride-hailing app or another company in a similar business, but from those who want to go out and buy cars. If I may, I think one of the biggest challenges there is consistency of service and assurance of service. And you know what I'm referring to, because this has gone as further as the consumer industry, the consumer ministry of India, people complaining that you don't know if you hail a ride, whether it's Uber or your competitor, whether the driver will actually go where you want them to. Kahan chalna hai is the most dreaded question. How are you addressing this?
Tamanna, you hit the nail on the head. And I'll be the first one to acknowledge that if you look at the pillars of the promise which we stand for, which is affordability, safety, and reliability. On reliability, we have had patches where the promise has gotten broken, or the confidence that we wanted consumers to have was eroded for a period of time, particularly with the jana, kahan hai, where when we promise you that you press a button, a four-wheeler, three-wheeler, two-wheeler comes, you shouldn't have to worry about whether the trip will happen, whether there will be a negotiation, etc. And that burden of fixing that has to be with the platform and resolving that. Without getting the root causes of what was causing it, particularly in light of coming out of the post-pandemic era, fuel price increases, we have gone ahead and through a very thoughtful process of hearing from drivers, hearing from consumers, we have deployed a bunch of technology solutions to fix that, and we are already seeing some good progress. There are three things we have done. Number one is we are making sure that the drivers get compensated in case they have long pickups, which was a big concern why they were choosing to cherry pick certain trips. Second, we're actually providing now a much detailed and higher information upfront to drivers with a single thesis that we are going to give you information where the trip will be, what the payment method will be, and if you accept it, then you must complete that trip. And thereby we are giving choice to the drivers, which they really wanted. At the same time, we want to take the burden away from the consumer and fulfill our promise. And the third thing which we have done is to obviously reflect our prices in line with the cost of operations, which is fuel prices going up. Collectively, we have seen more than 85% reduction in drivers now asking destination.
But what about cancellations? Have cancellations come down?
We have seen about a 40% reduction in cancellation. There are still pockets where either riders or drivers are cancelling because they feel that the journey to travel to pick up someone may not be worth their while, or for the consumer it may not be worth their wait. And we are working on some further solutions to fix that. So again, this is a pillar of our promise we obsess about. We have seen significant improvement. It will, from here on, it will get better as more vehicles enter the category. Remember, during the pandemic, the number of new vehicles entering the category slowed down organically and naturally. And as now demand has come back on the platform and cities are moving again, we are seeing a resurgence of confidence in drivers and fleets buying new cars, putting them on the road. We are also obviously bringing in three-wheelers and two-wheelers which have abundant supply already available. So between these measures, I'm pretty confident that you will be able to confidently say, look, Uber is a reliable service, and hence I may not need that second vehicle in the household, or for some people, the first vehicle.
So another bugbear, I would say, of consumers is surge pricing, because nobody likes to pay more and no one is quite sure what the algo behind it is. You could be paying, I think, 2, sometimes up to 3 times fare on the same distance, depending on surge pricing. Would you like to clarify how does Uber come up with these rates? What goes behind surge pricing, and why should consumers not feel that they're being unfairly charged higher?
I think this is an area which has obviously been debated for multiple times, and I think there is a lot more richness outside the ride-hailing category on this now. Indian Railways has actually embraced dynamic pricing. Airlines and hotels for time immemorial have had that. And I think now many consumers and drivers actually understand the value of this, because what it allows us to do is the platform to organically flex pricing in pockets where there are high demand or low demand, and to encourage more supply to come online. And you can see that work mostly reasonably well, other than in extreme situations, for example, extreme rains, etc., which we recognize are extraneous circumstances where we make sure that the algorithm kind of reflects that. So if you look at the core principles which we follow is to just improve the marketplace reliability, which is a promise which I said we want to fulfill, because eventually you need to compensate drivers for the extra effort they're putting in. The second is, across every city we operate, we already comply with local pricing regulations. And most states in the country have those pricing regulations. What that actually means is, even if there is some dynamism in the pricing, it will stay within those fare caps. So I think the consumers should actually have the confidence that when they are booking a trip real time, it is the most efficient pricing which is happening, which will help them actually complete the trip. And majority of the fare they are paying is actually going into the driver pockets. And you upfront get to see the fare, and in case there is any doubt after the trip is completed, you have the option through the app to press a button, and within mostly 24 hours you will get a response and a resolution in case there is a dichotomy in your understanding versus what the platform is telling you.
So all of these were some points from the consumer point of view, but since you spoke about drivers as well, anecdotally, drivers often say that they don't get as much as the consumer is being charged. And initially, when Uber came into India, they were getting a better deal, which is why they went out and they got their cars, and now they seem stuck with it. They're not making as much as before. Now, this is individual sort of stories or their perception, but what is the real picture?
I'll give you the facts which they should contrast any anecdotes, because it's very hard to respond to anecdotes. Yeah. Today, when a rider kind of pays a certain fare, a certain percentage of that goes as GST, which we collect on behalf of the driver and pass on to the central or the state government. And a very large percentage of the fare goes to the driver, who is the asset owner and who should be compensated for that. The way we look at some of the facts, if the driver does not make fair earnings for the effort he or she is putting in and for the cost of the vehicle investment they have made or the fleet partner is made, you will not see more drivers joining the platform. Today, as we speak, every month, we are onboarding more drivers on the platform than we have ever done in the history of our business in India.
Any numbers you can share in terms of what is the percentage that goes to drivers and the average number that you're onboarding?
On an average, the Uber would typically take about 20% as the service fee for being able to provide the service and all the infrastructure to be able to deliver the service. That's kind of the ballpark number. It may have some variation by
दीदी
cities,
अब
etc.,
ऐसे
depending on
ऑटो
the
लेने
case.
कहाँ तक जाओगी?
It is important. At the end of the day, the drivers are the face of the platform. They're the ones who are providing the service. The fleets and the drivers are the ones which are the asset owners. And providing them sustainable, fair earnings, which are better than any other alternative option which they may have, has to be a promise. Otherwise, they will choose to not drive with us. They may choose to drive with competition. They may choose to do trips outside the ride-hailing platforms. So because they have the flexibility to do that. So it is in our interest to make sure those earnings are sustainable. And the facts are there to say. Today, we have more than 600,000 active drivers on the platform who are doing at least one trip a week on the platform. And the number of new drivers entering is in thousands. I don't want to get into specifics, but larger than we have ever had in the history of our platform in the country.
Let me turn to your plans in India now. Of course, you know, we're speaking at a time when you are close to completing a decade. What next do you see in a country like India? Do you think you've been relatively conservative in tapping the scope of such a large country? And what is your, I would say, forward-looking outlook for your business here?
Tamana, we are incredibly excited about our long-term growth in India. India is a growth market, a priority market, and we are in it to win it. What that means is we want to serve a much larger consumer segment. Today, India is one of the least penetrated market when it comes to ride-hailing. Less than 0.6 to 0.5% consumers are of the addressable population are actively using ride-hailing platforms weekly. That number is close to 3.9% in a developed market like US. So the headroom for growth in India is just incredible. And I'd say we have barely scratched the surface. We are less than 1% done what the potential is. The path, however, to crack that is going to be multifaceted. It will require us to continue to have multiple form factors, not just cars-based products. Indians don't travel by AC cars. Most Indians actually travel by three-wheelers, two-wheelers, buses. And that's why we are diversifying our portfolio as we speak. Today, we do more trips on two-wheelers and three-wheelers than four-wheelers. We have just launched a pilot with buses, which is operational in one of the cities, and we look to bring it to more cities, which will allow us to serve a much larger consumer segment. The second thing is for us to continue to expand our geographical footprint. We have taken very conscious calls in the early years to go deeper into cities because we were not chasing vanity metrics like number of cities. Launching a city is easy, but making the service promise come true is a hard job. So now we are at 120 cities already, and we will continue to add more cities in the country. We have products which will allow us to do it. Three-wheelers, two-wheelers, which some of the cities which we are launching, for example, are being launched as auto-first or a moto-first city.
So no, I want to understand if there is a different approach to your tier 1 cities and your, say, tier 2, tier 3 cities. Is there a completely different plan? Because this is a very diverse country with very different kind of consumers everywhere.
You said it right, Tamanna. India is such a diverse, vibrant country with different segments. What's different? Form factors which consumers are comfortable with, and the infrastructure may actually make it easy for us to have e-rickshaws, three-wheelers and two-wheelers. So we are launching many cities with that. Second is access. There are consumers both in urban top tier 1 cities and tier 2, tier 3 cities who have said, look, I don't have space on my mobile phone to download more apps. I am very comfortable using, for example, WhatsApp. Can I book the Uber experience through WhatsApp? So we're now partnered with WhatsApp to run a pilot in Lucknow first, which is now taken to Delhi, to where you can just, without getting off outside WhatsApp, book the Uber ride, get the same experience, get the same support, get the same safety measures which you can get on the Uber app. And imagine that will allow us to serve the next 500 million consumers without having for them to download that. So access is a big issue. And then third is just the operating model. We do anticipate that there will be certain markets as we enter, we will have to innovate on support models, where we'll have to spend a lot more time and energy in educating consumers. So we are taking the route of partnerships, which will allow us to reach out to those consumers rather than having to do it ourselves. So again, different operating models to solve for unique customer needs.
You know, if I were to look at this from a wider point of view, a big change, which not just Uber, I would say the overall gig economy has brought to India, is options of employment. especially in a country like ours. That's very, very crucial. Can you give us any insight into the kind of people who have joined in with Uber India and how it has become an option of employment or a supplement to income?
Tamana, this is something which is very close to Uber institutionally, but personally very close to my heart. One of the reasons which drives me to help scale the business is the chance to provide livelihood opportunities to millions of youth of the country, and through them create a chance for them to have a respectable, flexible vocation, which they can choose to work when they want, where they want. What we have seen is, as ride-hailing platforms like Uber have scaled, it has attracted 2 to 3 different segments to come and join the platform. One is early on micro entrepreneurs who were willing to take risks in terms of buying an asset and then put on a ride-hailing platform. They were the early adopters. Many of them actually went on to have second, third, and fourth vehicle coming on the platform. Fast forward, we are now second generation of livelihood creation we have seen is now with fleet partners. There are, as because of the pandemic and kind of some of the impact of the slower new purchase of vehicles, we have seen fleet partners become the owners of vehicles and them bringing in employment opportunities on the gig platform by encouraging mostly youth, typically between 22 to 35 years of age, who may not necessarily have full schooling degrees. So they're creating full ecosystems to attract these drivers, and then they provide them a structure without them having to buy the asset. So the fleets are doing that. And third is, which is existing three-wheelers and two-wheeler owners. So today, if you have two-wheelers, we have seen food tech as an industry grow. Now, many of the food tech drivers have downtimes because food tech delivery times are complementary to ride-hailing peak times, like early mornings and early evenings versus afternoons and evenings. So now we are able to provide an extra earning opportunity to them through our Uber Moto product. Or for auto drivers, like for example, those in Mumbai, incredibly efficient, you can trust them to know the routes, etc. But there are pockets when they're actually sitting idle. And what if they can just open the app and do 2 or 3 trips a day on the Uber platform? And suddenly they can top up their earnings. It also helps us provide more options to our consumers. So we're seeing there are 3 different segments of benefits which the earners are able to get thanks to the variety. And that's the power of a tech platform where you can choose to work based on your own choices and flexibility. Not all drivers need to be working exclusively for Uber. Majority of them actually work for 2 apps, 3 apps, or do trips offline with tour and travel operators.
That's interesting because a lot of companies in this space, I'm not talking about ride hailing, but overall in this space, I would say in the broader gig economy, have pushed back as well, saying that it will sort of disturb the metrics. Do you think that's not an issue at all?
Look, at the way we take is we take a multi-decade view and also the experience of having seen this in other markets. At the end of the day, the core proposition is an earner on our platform should get flexibility and maximize earnings. That is why they join the platform. And they all aspire for a safety net. Today, we provide that safety net out of our own volition. For example, access to telemedicine, micro loans, in certain insurance, etc. Now, but if we are able to create a unified national framework, it will actually give so much comfort and confidence that it will bring the next 10 million gig workers into the category, not just ride-hailing, but other categories. So we believe this is actually great for livelihood creation, and we compliment the government of India for having come up with that. The only push we still continue to make is let's notify that so that the implementation can begin, so that the benefit can actually start passing on to the consumer. So we are wholeheartedly supportive of that. Having said that, there are areas outside code on social security and regulations we continue to advocate. We do believe that going forward, making it easy for more people to join the platforms, whether it be ride-hailing or other gig platforms, should be an imperative. For example, why should there be burdens around somebody having to buy a new car to join a ride-hailing platform when we are all supply constrained, right? Consumers are not getting enough cars because there are not enough cars on the road if you step out into the city. So how can the government make it easier to take existing assets which are sitting idle, which might be a different colored plate, or may not be a commercial vehicle, encourage them to come on the platform, make it easy for the differences which exist between state by state for ride-hailing companies, how about having a more unified set of guidelines which then make it easy to implement those? So multiple dialogues, but across the board we have found a huge openness and engagement, and we compliment both the central and the state governments on that.
I think another important part of the puzzle is how services like yours can push EV adoption. I know there are already plans that Uber has put into place, but if you can elaborate on your outlook on EV adoption and how these kind of services can be the game changer instead of waiting for individual car owners or potential car owners to go out and buy EV and then figure out where to charge them, etc. What kind of a difference can an Uber make?
Tamanna, we take our responsibility as a leading player in the category very seriously. We have made a global commitment to be emissions free by 2040. For India, while we still haven't defined specific targets, we look at a wider definition of sustainability, not just EV. We believe sustainability agenda for India will go through us using our technology to electrify, but also to enable hybrids and to also work in partnership with public transport authorities to bring in efficient modes like buses, which will fundamentally then reduce the burden from private vehicles and move it to more efficient, low emission per capita form factors like buses. So it's going to be a spectrum of issues. When it comes to electrification particularly, we believe it's a team sport. We have a role to play, and everybody in the ecosystem has to come together to get the category to a tipping point. OEMs have to produce enough vehicles at the right price point. Yeah. The current price points are actually not viable for any driver or fleet to go and buy those vehicles. The subsidies have to continue, and there has to be predictability in the subsidies. There need to be clarity around charging infrastructure. And so what we are taking is a partnerships approach. We're like, look, the environment will evolve. Let us work with every OEM or majority of OEMs, battery technology providers, charging infra providers, and see what is the right answer for ride hailing. We already have 5,000 electric vehicles across four-wheeler, three-wheeler, and two-wheeler on the Uber platform today. So out of the 600,000 plus active drivers, I told you 5,000 plus are electric. And we'll continue to then explore different partnerships and scale them up. But again, our commitment is absolute. The timing will be a function of how the ecosystem can come together.
So that depends on whether people on your platform want to go EV. There's nothing you're saying you can do to push EV adoption.
So we have some role to play, Tamanna. For example, we can help charging service providers figure out where to put the charging stations so that it is efficient. So that when drivers buy those vehicles, they don't have to have as much downtime. Second is we ensure higher utilization of vehicles. The first adoption in the commercial space will happen in ride hailing. So if the vehicle can be utilized to as much as possible, the economics will be far more attractive for somebody to buy those vehicles. Third, we have a role to play in terms of driving consumer awareness. So for example, once we have sufficient critical mass of vehicles, we can create dedicated electric vehicle views on the Uber app, which will then encourage consumers to opt into that, maybe even pay a minor premium for those because they want to leave a lesser carbon footprint. And we can do that. So we are very committed to doing that, but not all pieces are fully yet there. So for example, I want to put a few thousand four-wheeler vehicles on an experimental basis. There is no manufacturer who is able to produce four-wheelers at a price point which would make sense for people to buy that. Yeah. Right? So there has to be a continued dialogue and push to make this happen. Yeah. But again, I'm very optimistic. This is a journey. We are at a very early stage of it, and we will continue to play a pretty material part in that journey.
All right, so exciting things to look forward to. Thank you so much, Prabhjeet, for joining us today. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.